Welcome back to Spider-Man Month here on World Class Bullshitters. Now everyone knows that Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Everyone knows that he shoots webs of any size and catches thieves just like flies. But there's many things that people still get wrong about the character, no matter how popular he becomes. So today, for this video, celebrating Spider-Man Month, I'm going to count down 5 things that everyone gets wrong about Spider-Man. Number 5. Spider-Man 3 was a failure. We get it. Spider-Man 3 wasn't good. But there's a narrative floating around that Spider-Man 3 was a failure and it killed the Raimi franchise. While it is the lowest rated critically, it's still the highest grossing Spider-Man film to date. It came out during peak Spider-Mania in the early 2000s and grossed over $890 million, placing it 3rd for the year, and it even holds a record for the highest opening weekend for a Spider-Man film, with $151 million, and adjusted for inflation, $178 million. There are numerous sources for reasons why we never got a Spider-Man 4, but the main culprit seems to be Sony. They wanted a Spider-Man 4, but when those involved weren't interested in the direction they were going with it, they left. And it was Sony who pulled the plug and decided to start fresh again. Number 4. He's always been a skinny superhero. Another common misconception about Spider-Man that a lot of older fans seem to complain about is the fact that Spider-Man became too muscle-bound, thus removing one of his traits that makes him unique. They usually use this as a critique against John Romita for taking over artistic duties from Steve Ditko, but again, they're wrong. While Spider-Man did debut skinny and lanky, that soon changed. By issue number 8, Spider-Man was already featuring a traditional physique, but due to Steve Ditko's quirky art style, it didn't resemble how other artists depicted muscular anatomy. In issue 8, we see Peter facing off against Flash Thompson in a boxing match, and physically he's not too far off from Flash. As the series progressed, Spider-Man would become more muscular under Ditko's pencil, and that would continue for the rest of the series. Number 3. He's always been a teenager. For some reason, society seems to think that Spider-Man has been perpetually in high school. Critics like Jeremy Jahns often cite young Spider-Man as the version they grew up with, but that's not the case. As you will learn later, Spider-Man was in high school for less than 4% of the comics in the 616 universe. Every adaptation up until 2012 focused mostly on college or post-college Spider-Man. So when adults tell you kid Spider-Man was the one they grew up with, they're wrong. I'm not sure where this ignorance stems from either, but it is perpetuated by everyone from the uninformed all the way up to Marvel themselves. The early issues of Spider-Man were great, but the gimmick of a kid superhero ended rather quickly and was not a defining trait of Spider-Man for very long. Number 2. You're spelling his name wrong. While the words spider and man are incredibly basic words that children can spell, it seems hard for most people to spell the name Spider-Man correctly. Even Google is guilty of this error. So you're probably asking yourself, what the hell are you talking about? Well, what I mean is, if you don't include the hyphen in his name, you're spelling it wrong. According to Spider-Man himself, in issue number 19 of Amazing Spider-Man, if anyone asks what happened to you guys, be sure to spell my name right. There's a hyphen in it, remember. While this seems nitpicky, it's another thing that everyone seems to get wrong about Spider-Man. Number 1. The Raimi films aren't accurate to the comics. Ever since The Amazing Spider-Man was announced, everyone suddenly turned on the Raimi trilogy and denounced it at every turn. One common, but commonly incorrect criticism was that the Raimi films weren't accurate to the comics. The often cited complaints were lack of mechanical web shooters, a lack of humor, and the fact that he was too old. But those aren't the things that make Spider-Man who he is. Those are superficial complaints that are picked up by those disinterested in the character and want to be a part of whatever's popular at the moment. First off, the fact that he doesn't have mechanical web shooters doesn't change who the character is. If you have no problem with him being able to climb walls, then what's the stretch about him shooting webbing from his wrist? On to the jokes. Everyone uses the excuse, he doesn't make any jokes. Well, that's not true at all. Spider-Man makes plenty of jokes, when appropriate, just like in the comics. Depending on the situation, Spider-Man will joke, and he will joke good, but it's only when he feels like he's not threatened. During more serious times, he's focused on the fight, and the dialogue on the page is his internal monologue. Read any story where Aunt May or Mary Jane's lives are in danger, and you will see that the humor correlates with what you saw on screen in those films years ago. Something that everyone seems to ignore or just not know is the fact that Raimi's Spider-Man isn't based on the earliest issues. Those films are a potpourri of Spider-Man through the ages. For example, in the first film, the climax takes place on the George Washington Bridge. This scene mirrors Amazing Spider-Man number 121, where Spider-Man fights with the Green Goblin after he's captured Gwen Stacy. The scene plays out quite similarly to the book, only MJ doesn't die. The fight scene that follows is almost a scene-by-scene translation from page to screen. There are only small changes, like the fact that Spider-Man does a backflip to dodge the Goblin Glider instead of ducking out of the way. Other than that, it's accurate. Other scenes that are pulled directly from the pages are the scene where Spider-Man dumps his suit in the trash. No other comic book movie has adapted a panel more faithfully. Even the aftermath where the suit is presented to J. Jonah Jameson is the same, except a small boy is replaced by a garbage man. The bell tower scene from Spider-Man 3 where he's separated from the black costume is directly ripped from Web of Spider-Man number 1. Hell, the origin from Part 1 is almost a perfect adaptation of Amazing Fantasy number 15, wrestling career and all. Again, they make changes to modernize things, but they're the closest adaptation to Spider-Man anyone has ever seen. Besides ripping out panels from the pages and slapping them up on the screen, the characters were done right too. People love to make the mopey Tobey Maguire joke, but every actor to play Spider-Man has cried, even your new sacred Tom Holland, and only Tobey cried when appropriate. Spider-Man cried after he captured Uncle Ben's killer in the book, and Tobey Maguire cried before so. Go watch that scene, it's powerful. He goes from shock to sadness to anger, and it adds so much emotion to the film. People also love to say how old he looks. Yes, he doesn't look like a kid, but we're not making Spider-Boy. In the first film, he's 18, and in the comics, Peter is 17, as stated by Daredevil in issue number 16. He was never even a little boy when the character was created. This criticism is frankly wrong because people confuse the Ultimate Comics with all the comics. Even channels like Geekvolution that claim to be experts brush over this because it's the popular criticism to make. But if you crack open a comic book, you'll see that they, and most of the internet culture, is wrong. Another thing people seem to harp on, inaccurately I might add, is the fact that Spider-Man should be in high school. No. He was in high school until issue number 28. It was what made him unique in the beginning, but his character has spent a majority of his life out of it. If we break it down and only stick to the Amazing series, Spider-Man has spent 4% of the books in high school. The time spent in college, based on our real time, was decades. A college-age Spider-Man is better because there are less limitations put on the creators, but this is veering off into an opinion piece. Finally, the supporting cast and villains. Aunt May is old in both the 616 universe and the Ultimate Universe. She may be a hipper version in the Ultimate Universe, but she still has white hair and wrinkles. Rosemary Harris is the only actress to look like May Parker. Marissa Tomei is the hottest, and Sally Field is the holiest, but Rosemary had the roll down the best. Go watch the scene from Spider-Man 2 where Peter tells her he's responsible for the death of Uncle Ben, and see some real acting at play. There's also the Daily Bugle staff, which was always a huge part of the character. You already know how great J.K. Simmons was, but Elizabeth Banks as Betty Brant, Ted Raimi as Hoffman, and Bill Nunn as Joe Robbie Robertson fleshed out the environment and made it feel real. Even Robbie hinted at knowing Peter was secretly Spider-Man, which is something from the comics. With the exception of Venom and the Sandman's link to Uncle Ben's death, the villains are done right too. Sandman is just a thug concerned with getting money. In the book, he just appears one day and Spider-Man mentions having heard of him. Then they fight. In Spider-Man 3, they give him some more motivation, which I like, but it's essentially the exact same character. Doc Ock's plan from Spider-Man 2 is directly out of the Amazing Spider-Man number 4, which is his first appearance. And the Green Goblin was done just right too. There was this Jekyll and Hyde dynamic that they brought. There was the fact that he knew Peter's secret identity and his knowing how to get to Peter the most by attacking him at the heart. Even if we expand the Goblin to Harry, it's pulled straight from the spectacular Spider-Man number 200. Harry dies a hero, saving Peter after he realizes what he's done was the Goblin and not himself. The Raimi films are accurate to the whole history of Spider-Man, but the superficial reasons why people can't get past, and they criticize those films unjustly. These films are adaptations of the Romita Lee issues, not the Ditko Lee issues, and certainly not the Ultimate versions. Websites, bloggers, and YouTubers always seem to get this wrong because they're ignorant to the fact that Spider-Man has existed for over 50 years and these movies weren't based on cartoons or the newest comics. It's the same reason why people clamor for a Miles Morales movie. Nerd culture has lost its attention span and everyone on the internet clamors for what the newest version is to be put on film. The Raimi Spider-Man flicks weren't perfect, but they got Spider-Man right. You just didn't know it. So that was my list. I know some of it was very nerdy, nitpicky, but those were things I'm pretty sure you didn't realize. So, I lived up to the title of the video. And if you're a big fan of the Raimi films, I'm sure you'll give this video a thumbs up, and if you're not, I'm sure you'll complain about Tobey Maguire dancing in Spider-Man 3, because that's all the ammo you really have. But as always, thanks for taking your time to watch this video. Please share it, please give it a thumbs up, and just comment. I love to read what you guys have to say. I try to read almost every comment, and some weeks there are hundreds, so it takes time, but you people are worth it. We'll be back on Thursday night with World Class Bullshitters, and the crew is all back, so expect a great episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.